I'm going to try to tell a story that you can verify. Is Bob Bird here? Hey, there he is right there. Now, he's involved in this, and I'm going to stretch a blanket a time or two, but I promise not to tear it. And I had the good fortune of having a cow crew of John Scott, and Bob Bird, and men like Merle Kelton, and I called them and Dick Hart, my board of directors. And boy, they knew the answer to nearly any problem that came up. And we had a little old ranch lease down there around Lorraine, and it was really brushy. And Bob named it the No Edom Ranch. And I used it to put old cows down there that I thought I could get one more calf out of, because it lay the straddle of that Silver Creek. And the winter feed was really good. And the brush was thick, the grass didn't grow good in summer, but in the winter that wild rye and fiddlery was really good. And I'd put them older cows down there. Well, we were delivering one time, and we'd worked up there on the Devil Mountain, all up in there, and had those calves ready to deliver. And Bob took a crew and went on down to Lorraine, to the No Edom Ranch. But Corey Pound's dad was cooking for him, had a good rig, and was down there cooking for him. And when I got done shipping, well, I came on down. And everybody knows that I don't want a dog around when I'm working cattle. And they pick at me all the time about that. And so even Helen Groves, she was coming one time to see me and stay with us, and said, "I'm bringing you a pooch." I said, "Helen, you bring me a dog and I'll cut his tail off behind his ears." And she said, "I'm going to show up with him." Sure enough, next day she showed up with a poodle, one of those little long, low dogs, but it was an iron dog, and you could scrape your boots off on it when it's muddy. And so I didn't cut his tail off. But they were always picking at me a little, but I heard the cows bawling. Boy, that brush is thick down there. And I kept trying to find them, and let me tell you about how thick that brush is. One time, John Scott hadn't been down there with me, and we used little old radios. And John took a little crew to go down lower and start to drive. And I'd been telling him how brushy it was. He got down there, and I said, "John, you ready?" He called me and said, "I'm ready to start." And I said, "Is it brushy down there?" Yeah, he said, "We just killed a rattlesnake backing out." But anyway, that's how brushy it was. And I found those cattle, and they was in the edge of an old field clearing, and some boys holding them up, and there's a boy come trotting up. He was a cousin to Corey, and it was a bad dog followed him. I mean, one of them kind that really eat a cow up. And boy, I cut down on him, and J.C. Bonine's a Montana cowboy and a good one, and I was sitting there with him, and he looked over at me and said, "Bob's dog." And I didn't say anything. I knew Bob had some dogs, and I wasn't going to hurt his feelings over that dog. So we went on, and we're getting these cattle together, and they're all kind of going toward a little 3-wire fence corner. And Bob, I see Bob and go over and ride along with him, shake hands with him, and he he doesn't know that J.C. Bonines gave him that dog. And he has no idea. So we're riding along there, and Bob looks over at me and said, I'd left my dog at home, but said didn't have anybody tend to him. And I thought, well, Mary's wife works, so that's the reason he brought him. And I didn't say anything, and these cattle are starting to come together pretty good, and these old big calves haven't seen anybody all year, and they're kind of standing on their toes. And directly I see that dog coming wide open. And I look over at Bob, and I said, Bob, can you stop your dog? Oh, yeah. He said, I can slide him anywhere I want him. And so here this dog come between us wide open, on toward them cattle, and Bob don't say a word. I was disappointed. I just didn't believe that he wouldn't get that dog sliding, And directly he looked over at me and he said, he's going up there to bring him out of that corner. And he did too. In a dead rot. Well, Dick Hart and I wound up head up. And I just couldn't stand it. We finally got these cows stopped. And I looked over at Dick and I said, I wish Bob had left his dog at home. He said, that ain't Bob's dog. Said, he's been following us 3 or 4 days. So I said, Dick, can you catch that dog? He said, I don't know. I said, I'll try. So he handed me his horse, and he had a pretty long picking string. And he got off, and the dog let him touch him on the head, and he slipped that picking string around his neck. And it started tying out in it so he wouldn't choke him. Boy, that dog jumped up, and Dick just barely held him. It looked like a fish on a line out there, and he went under Dick's horse, and I wasn't watching what I was doing, and that horse kicked on both sides of Dick. He turned the dog loose. Well, he takes off dragging that rope, and but he gets out of our way, gets way off out there, and we have to mammy those cows up and go through about a half a mile of real heavy brush, strip them off, and sex them, and load them on trucks. And we got that done without another incident. And I tell everybody I'm not that nervous as I act. I'm just real alert, fantastically alert when I'm fixing to weigh cattle. And things went good, but I noticed everything. And we got on in to eat lunch, and boy, Mr. Pounds had us a fine lunch, and Bob found out about that deal. He never knew that he had played such a good part and didn't own the dog. I never saw a man laugh so hard, and the rest of them just found out it'd come together. And but then we went on back to process cows, and the big old boy that owned the place come out to Corey, and he'd seen his dad clean up and we was through and left. And he come out to Corey and said, somebody put a rope around my wife's dog's neck. Corey looked over at him and said, yeah, that was our cook. But, I found out that I have a lot of adventure in this cow business, love it. Love working cattle, and I got a pretty good knot on my head here, one of those adventures. I'm finding out that most of those adventures are caused by poor planning, in case y'all want to know. That's about all I got to say.
Well, that's a pretty good amount.
And I got to tell one more thing about Merle, and then I'll let him go on. One time he'd rode his horse down on some old country we had leased over there, the Atkins country. And it is the roughest country in Kent and Scurry County. And I caught him a horse we call Cotton. And I had led him up to him and said, Merle, you'll like this horse. He can hardly mizzle, run. Now, he can run a hole in the wind. And he'll watch a cow. Merle said, I don't want him watching the cow. I'll watch the cow. I want him to watch the ground. Go ahead, Merle. I got to mention this one more thing. Merle and I was roping. I had a little roping club at Las Vegas, and we were roping together and having a lot of fun and winning a little bit, especially Merle. And I didn't see him for several years. Next time I saw him, he was winning the go-around in El Paso, Texas.
The reason you hadn't seen me is I'd been in the Army for 2 years overseas. Pretty hard to make.
He come back roping, though. You know, I got this from riding a 3-year-old filly, and I'm going to quit them young horses. I want to say one thing. Bob Bird, I went to him to see if he'd help me when we bought that Double Mountain right from Spires. He'd run Spires cow outfit for 30 years. He said, yeah, I will, but said, there's 3 things I don't want. I said, what's that? He said, a bedroll, a slicker, and a hackamore. Well, I got him back in the slicker and the bedroll, never did get him in the hackamore, and I'm looking for a place to turn my hackamore in.
Don't run into my house. I'm through with that. That was my first introduction to John Robert Scott. He was quite a cowman, but he moved back to Angelo, didn't he?
Yes, bought a little place down there and fixed it up real nice. Set of corrals you could handle 2,000 head of cattle in. And I think he had 160 acres. But boy, everything was up to snuff. You know, funny thing was working one time, and that good cowboy Billy Alvin was working for me, you know, and he found an old 1950 Western Horseman, and it said that John Scott had won the first 3 go-rounds of the jerk down steer roping in Cheyenne, and come out in the finals and jerked his horse down and the steer down, and of course John, and the article said John Scott jumped up, grabbed his horse and re-tripped the steer and wound up 3rd. And John said, yeah, said that horse was the hardest horse to catch, but for some reason that day he stood still, let me run get up to him.